Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at a game from the 1954 World Chess Championship match. This is a round 9 game. On the white end, challenger Vasily Smyslov. He's paired against Mikhail Botvinnik. So let's dive in and see how this one plays out. We have a French defense. Smyslov, just a few years after this match, would become the 7th world champion. Winawer variation, advance. After c5 and a3, most common nowadays is to knock the knight out. We don't have that in this one. Instead, the pin is maintained. Now, there's a nice follow-up here, the move played in the game. You can take a page out of Smyslov's book, b4. This is looking to do two things. One, distract the c-pawn from exerting pressure on the white center. And two, unpin the knight, so that knight b5 is enabled. If there's one square that is weakest in Black's camp, it is d6, and the knight is not long off from getting there with great effect. Now, the move played in the game is the best move in the computer's eyes to capture on d4, but suppose b4 is captured. It's important to see how this plays out just for a couple moves. Knight b5 would be the follow-up, and d6 is now under observation. If Black picks up a pawn, that's no problem. c3, and now knight d6 is soon to hurt. Not only that, but other dark squares could come under fire. g7 is a sensitive square, and let's not forget about bishop a3. Soon we could have 3 of the white pieces putting great pressure on Black's dark squares. White is the preferred side here, despite being down a pawn. More than enough compensation. In this game, c takes d4. The knight is under fire. You could take the bishop. None of the above here. Queen g4. Immediately striking where Black is vulnerable. g7 is really an awkward, this threat on g7, it's an awkward move to meet. Computer suggests king f8, g6 as a next best move. None of the above. Botvinnik says, I'm just not even going to do that. I'm going to go for something active. Play knight e7, give up the pawn, and look for some activity. So we have a couple captures on the queen side. That imbalance is now, there's an imbalance now present. Bishop for knight exchange. Queen takes g7. Now, this is may sound like a bit of a strange pop quiz, but right now, after this last capture, there's one square that sticks out to me more than any other on the board. What square is that and why? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, this square right here is a fantastic square. Now, what makes me say this? Well, I'm looking at the imbalance right now, the bishop versus knight, and Black is without a dark square bishop. f6 is a hole. f6 is a dark square. f6 also has the control of a pawn. What does this mean? Well, it means ideally there's a dream square for this bishop. Get to f6 and you morph into a rook. You are a 5-point piece, maybe even more. It's a really good square. Okay, first things first. Few choices for Black. Have to react to the threat. White scoops up another pawn, and knight to d7 as the follow-up. This move struck me as a bit strange at first glance. Why not go to c6 and throw a punch? We're going to see why. First, some defensive e5, and now we see the point. Flush the queen away, knight f8. Queen drops back to d3, queen takes a5. So we're at a moment right now where things have, it's a bit calm right now. Those last handful of moves have been, punches, counter punches, or punches, and a reaction to the threat. There's no threat with Black's last move. So this is one of those moments where you question how to maybe deploy the pieces, what plan to undertake. What would you do here? What would maybe be your next move as White? Feel free to pause the video. Here we go. The move played in the game, I really like this move. No development. Not going to hear me say that too often. I like this move because there's no development. This move here, h4, is great. It's a passed pawn, And you'd be surprised to see how fast this pawn can run. It is ideally, or the rook is ideally placed right behind the pawn, so its every movement has the support of this piece. Moreover, when you factor in this unopposed bishop, once it gets to its dream square f6, this pawn is basically unstoppable. A bishop on f6 does what in particular? Control that promotion square. This pawn is a killer. So, as the follow-up, bishop d7, bishop g5, rook c8, knight d4. This is a brief game. We're actually only 10 moves out. It's a 25-move game. Yeah, very direct play. Knight f5, rook b1. This is where black falters. There's a threat against b7. This is ignored. Black is looking for something more direct. Clearly some kind of miscalculation goes on with black's next move. b6 is a fine reply. Instead, rook c4, throwing a punch. Knight takes knight. And now rook takes b7. So this is going to be a problem for Team Black. The move played in the game, rook e4. How would you reply in this position? White's under fire, white's in check. What to do? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, here we go. Queen takes rook. Anybody come up with that one? Yeah, after the queen is recaptured, rook b8. Not many choices for black. Gotta block with the bishop. Queen block would be mate. It's coordination on d8. And we don't take the bishop in this position. This allows the king to escape. So what do you do? Bishop b5. These bishops are nightmares. And the queen now has to give herself up. Doing something else? This is worst. This is the worst move because it would be a mate in 2. So, queen takes bishop is necessary. Queen takes rook. Knight e6. And what to do? There's a threat on g5. White is up the exchange now. Bishop f6. Who cares about the g-pawn? This pawn is just way too fast. That's what happens. Rook takes g2, h5. Bishop a6, and there's only one more move in this game. h6. Game over. The rook is under fire, but it does not matter. You can take the rook. This pawn will fly. No stopping it. You're getting a queen next move with check. It's true in this position. There are other options. You could address this threat against the rook by giving a check and then playing here, but things can become a little bit tricky. What do I mean? Well, the move e3 can happen. And you can see a lot of the squares being watched over by the black pieces that are right next to the king. It's easy to go wrong playing as white in this position. So once more, h6 is the final move in the game. Black resigns. But if you give this check and only then go here, how do you deal with e3? So this is maybe a good moment. There's only one move that is winning for white here. Can you spot what that is? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, the only move that wins for white is to play bishop h4 and hold this point. It's not an easy move to make. This backward move, you'd like to maybe push the pawn or capture here. So pushing the pawn would be no good. You'd end up in a mate in 3, like this. Something else? Instead of pushing the pawn, if you capture the pawn, this is now going to be a draw after rook takes c2. This pawn is now passed, and if you try to run with this guy, now you'd actually be losing. The rook can sacrifice itself for the pawn, and this pawn is really fast. So something like this. The knight's going to be able to control this queening square. Needless to say, it's very easy to go wrong. White saw it better, or best in this position, to ignore this threat and simply get on with this advance of the passed pawn. So if this game did play out after h6 capture, h7, how is this maybe a little bit different after e3? Well, white is promoting with check. And now you can take here and meet the move rook takes c2 with rook h7. There's no longer a fear of the rook being picked up, and, well, white is ready to now start having all the fun, capturing on f7 and follow-up checks with the queen. So this is as far as I went in this one, just a 25 mover, h6, final move in this one. Very fast pawn, especially when connected with the rook right behind it and having a piece around that controls that promotion square. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe even took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.